and welcome to The Real Tea on PMP, where we talk all things pregnancy and postpartum. I'm your host, Akira Bias, and if this is your first time joining, welcome. If this is like your second or your third, welcome back, and thank you for rocking with me. Like, we're still here. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. This was actually given to me by my subscribers and people in my DMs. They were like, you really need to cover this story. This is very important and it pertains to your podcast topic. So I thought, okay, cool. So this story is about Adriana Smith, and I don't know if you've heard it or not, but it's been nationwide across media outlets. It's been on social media. I'm talking about TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, everyone's talking about it. And what's really interesting is that it covers the intersectionality between reproductive rights and bioethics. Now, for those of you who haven't heard, Adriana Smith is a 30-year-old nurse at Emory Hospital. She's a mother of one, and now she's carrying her second child when she was declared brain dead back in February. So she was just 9 weeks at the time when she suffered from severe blood clots during her early pregnancy. Now, to be considered brain dead, it's usually a condition that follows by the no neuroactivity. So Adriana cannot breathe on her own. She is literally fully dependent on machines to do the breathing for her, essentially keeping her alive. But due to the strict Georgia rules, abortion laws that was enacted in 2019, the heartbeat law specifically, she's been kept on life support for 90 days and counting. So this law prohibits abortion for fetal cardiac activity when detected usually around like 6 weeks. Now, what's interesting is that that's the time where most women find out that they're even pregnant at 6 weeks. So the minute that you find out that you're pregnant, there's a heartbeat, you no longer have the option of having an abortion. So under Georgia law, a fetus with a heartbeat is granted legal personhood, meaning that it now has its own rights as a separate person. Now, according to her mother, April Newkirk, Adriana has been experiencing these headaches very early and often, and they were really severe.
Enough to know that something was wrong.
April Newkirk says her daughter went to Northside Hospital for help.
They gave her some medication, but they didn't do any tests. They didn't do any CT scans. If they did, they would have caught it.
The next morning, Adriana's boyfriend noticed something was terribly wrong.
She was gasping for air in her sleep, gargling. More than likely it was blood. She was taken to Emory, Decatur, and then she was transferred here
to Emory University Hospital, where Adriana worked as an RN. Unfortunately, there was nothing doctors could do.
They did a CT scan and she had blood clots all in her head. So they had asked me if they could do a procedure to relieve them, and I said yes. And then they called me back and they said that they couldn't do it.
Doctors declared Adriana brain dead.
So I feel as if somebody dropped the ball at the hospitals, and her boyfriend asked, please keep her. If she was kept at the hospital, we wouldn't be here.
Because of Georgia's heartbeat bill, which bans abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected, her family says they weren't given any say in what happens next.
So she did as any concerned person would. Adriana went to seek out medical care at Northside Hospital in Decatur and was given medication for the headaches and then sent home. But her mother explains that Northside hospitals failed her because they didn't do any further testing. They just gave her the medication and sent her on her way. No CT was done, nothing, right? So unfortunately, the following day, Adriana tragically passed away and she was unresponsive. So she suffered multiple blood clots and was declared brain dead at Emory Hospital. Now we have these new developments that are coming in that suggest that the baby now has fluid in the brain, right? Which is not a good sign either. So understandably, April, Adriana's mother, is heartbroken, right? She spoke to a specific local news outlets, and she was saying that my daughter is pregnant with my grandson, but he may be blind, he may not be able to walk, he may be wheelchair bound, and he may not even survive once he's born, right? Because everything at this point is up in the air. So the family is not only navigating this intense emotional pain, but also the growing financial burden. She's been on life support for 90 days, right? And if we're gonna keep it real, keeping someone on life support for 90 days is very expensive, especially with the current state of our healthcare system, right? So the cost is accruing every day. And then if they do decide to take her off life support, the financial cost now falls on the family. So they're dealing with so much right now, I can't even imagine, right? So they're dealing with the loss of their daughter because she's technically brain dead. Then they have to try to explain to Adriana's young son that his mother's no longer there. And then you compile that with these medical bills. And then on top of all of that, they have no say in where she goes as far as her health care. They have no rights in that regard. So let's talk about the heartbeat law. I know I mentioned it before. So the heartbeat law is formerly the House Bill 481, or the Life Act, which bans abortions once the fetal heartbeat is detected. So again, that typically happens at 6 weeks. Now, the law grants fetuses with a detectable heartbeat legal personhood under that state law. So the key thing here is that once the heartbeat is detected, boom, the fetus has rights. That's it. No ifs, ands, or buts. And because of that, abortion is no longer an option, right? So there's some implications for Adriana's case, because in her particular case, the law is being interpreted to mean that life support must continue so that the fetus can reach viability, which basically just means that she's like an incubator, a womb. She's literally just there to keep this baby alive that we may not even know that he'll survive. Now, I'm no lawyer, but the legal experts say that the hospital may feel obligated to treat the baby as a separate patient, right? So this highlights just how complicated and murky these laws can be, especially in a real life medical crisis. The things that we don't necessarily think about, but to be honest, we should, right? Because brain death means that there's no brain activity, none in the brainstem, nothing, right? And it's considered a legal death in Georgia and in most 50 states in the United States. So I feel like her medical team, honestly, they're stuck between a rock and a hard place, right? Because now they're torn between doing what's best for her, right? Medical ethics, and then now they have this legal requirement that's kind of looming and hanging over their heads, right? So I'm sitting here thinking to myself, like, what can they do in that situation, right? Because on one hand, they don't want to lose their license and the hospital doesn't get sued, but they also want to know what's best for their patients. So as my viewers and listeners that are listening to the story, I want to ask you this. Should life support continue when a person is pronounced legally dead, especially when the prognosis for the fetus are unclear? And also, who gets to make that call, right? Like, shouldn't the family be able to make that call? Now, this case raises some questions, though, about who gets to make the decision about a woman's body, even after she's been declared dead. So not only did they fail her while she was alive, but even after in death, she's being failed. And I wouldn't be me if I didn't talk about the racial disparities that are applicable here, right? So we can't ignore race here. As much as we want to, we just can't. Because again, Black women in Georgia and in the United States are more than 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications compared to white women, right? And Adriana's case isn't just a tragedy, it's part of a bigger pattern of systemic inequities that happen within our healthcare. Now, this could set a new legal precedence for how laws are applied and end to life and reproductive care. What happens here may influence his cases and laws in the future across the country. Because now we're having all these conversations about what we thought would be common sense, but clearly are not. And there's so many like rules in a gray area and also a gap. So I really want to take the time to have this conversation and also bring it to the comments, right? So if you find this topic interesting, please, let's take a moment to just ask ourselves, what are these questions? Should state laws override family decisions in end-of-life care? Put yourself in her shoes, or put yourself in your friend's shoes, or just someone that you care about. And also, what does bodily autonomy mean to you? And where should the line be drawn, especially when it comes to pregnancy? Should it change? Should it stay the same? I'm really curious to see what your thoughts are. And lastly, how much influence should public pressure and social media, or even me, have on legal decisions like this? Do you feel like we have a say? Do you feel like as a people we can come in and talk about these discussions or not? I'm really curious. I feel like this is the time to really think before you're in these positions, to really take the time to ask yourselves, what do I want? What do I want my family to have rights are? And also put yourselves in positions and in place so that you can have these things. So thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate you listening. And also, I think this is an important conversation. It's very timely and also very unfortunate. It really poses the question, are we really prepared? Do we have rights over our own bodies? And also, who makes those decisions? If the people that love us most and that are closest to us can't decide on what's best for us, then what else do we have? So again, thank you for tuning in, and I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Bye.